Instagram has said video is the future, so I'm moving to video. Okay, so I am getting into video, but it actually has nothing to do with Instagram. Although I do feel like there is some truth to that. I do think that video services and video in general is becoming more and more popular. And although I do think there will be a place for photography for the foreseeable future, I do think a lot of clients and people that are looking for photography services are also looking for photographers that can do video, or they're specifically looking for video services. So for quite some time, I had wanted to introduce video into my services in my business because I am a full-time photographer. And so I'm always looking at ways to expand services, increase revenue, increase client base, that sort of thing. So I've been wanting to dive into video stuff for a while, and I just kind of never did it. I didn't really have time. I didn't jump into it. And so I was working on a couple business plans, and I decided now is the time. Let's jump into it. IG is shifting. The market is shifting. I don't want to get left behind. So I'm jumping into video. So in this video, I want to just talk about the rig that I put together. And I wanted to put together a rig that was somewhat budget friendly. I know it's not as budget friendly as some other options that are out there, but I would say this is by far not the most expensive setup you can have. So I just wanted to talk about what I have, and also wanted to include you in on this journey because for a long time, I've really just been a photographer and I've dabbled in some video, but I've not really jumped into it. So I'm really starting from square one with this video thing. And I thought it would be cool to bring this to my channel so that you could see my journey and see the growth and the progression. And you can give me your feedback when I post some stuff to elicit feedback and all of that good stuff. So I didn't break this all back down the way they do in a lot of videos with the camera rigs because, quite frankly, I didn't want to break it down and then have to put it back together. And I don't really feel like that makes a huge difference. Unless you want to see something like that, this isn't going to be the video for you. But I just wanted to kind of go over what I have on this rig and why I picked the things that I have. Now, first of all, let's start with the camera. This is my EOS R. And I decided to basically make this my dedicated video camera. Since I predominantly use my R5 for photography, I thought it would make sense to use another camera where I can just cage it out and just keep it that way and wouldn't have to worry about, taking things off to use it for photography, putting it back on for video. So it was just easier to use this. And since the autofocus is pretty good on the R and it's a small, lightweight body, it was the perfect choice. So that's what I started with first of all. Now, everything that I have on here in terms of the cage and the handles and all that, it's all SmallRig. Now, the reason why I went with SmallRig is mainly because it's a company that I've heard of a lot, and I know that their stuff is fairly well constructed. For the most part, it's pretty affordable. Like I said, it's not gonna be as cheap as like some Universal stuff or some other third-party options, but I knew it was well made, reliable, and they have a lot of accessories. That was also kind of the thing that I liked as well. So I started out with the cage that was specific for the EOS R. And this particular cage came with the top handle. Now, this isn't any different than their top handle that you could just buy normally. It just so happened to be packaged together, and I think I saved a little bit of money that way. So I believe the cage was $90. I bought it from Adorama. You can also get it from Amazon. I'm actually not sure why I bought it from Adorama instead of Amazon. Well, it's better to support Adorama than Amazon anyway. So that was actually a good call on my part, even though I wasn't thinking that at the time. But anyway, so I have the SmallRig cage with the handle. And this is basically just their L-shaped aluminum handle with a bunch of different mounting options on it, which is really good. There is a slot back here that has the RE pins and that sort of thing. So Obviously, for me, I wanted to go with a cage that was built specifically for the camera because it's going to fit better. It's going to allow you to access your memory cards, your ports, your battery on the bottom. And it also is, if I didn't have this handle here, they really did good in rounding the edges. So that way, if I was holding this without the handles, it still would feel pretty good in the hand. So I really like that. So speaking of handles, I have side handles on each side. Now you may see where some people, when they do their rigs, they'll have a side handle on the left side and then they just use the camera grip as basically their grip on the right side, which is totally fine. And sometimes you see people just put the handle on the right side, which doesn't really make sense because you already have a grip there. But the reason why I chose to put a handle on each side was to be able to have a wider grip. I have a wider frame, and so naturally for me, comfortable, if I'm just holding something, this is the amount of space that I have for it to be comfortable. The more in I have to go, the more strain that it puts on my shoulders. So I wanted to be able to have as wide of a grip as possible. So having just the left handle and still having to hold the camera here, it just had my hands in a little bit more closer than what's comfortable. And I kind of really have to work to keep them in that way because naturally this is my natural stance. So I wanted to have a wider grip. So that's why I went with having a handle on both sides. So on the right side, I have the SmallRig universal handle, which I believe was $49. And this one has the kind of like an L bracket on it, so it kind of extends out the way. And a lot of people will use this particular handle on the other side to give them more room for the ports on this side. I didn't do that, and I'll touch on that in a minute. So this one is, it's nice. It has rubber grips on each side. It's got the cold shoe at the top, some mounting points. So it's good. A lot of people get the wooden handles because they feel better, that sort of thing. One thing that I had in mind when I was building this was that I wanted to keep the cost as low as I could, because just getting into video, you know, I don't know what my workflow is going to be like. I don't know what's going to be comfortable and what's not going to be comfortable. So I didn't want to jump in and start buying all of these expensive items only to find out that something doesn't work for me with how I choose to shoot or how I hold the camera or how I want to transport it or whatever. So I wanted to keep the cost relatively low. So that's why I didn't get like the wooden handle. That's why I didn't get one with like a NATO rail and the ones that can rotate and all the fancy features. I just went with something basic because I literally am just getting into videography. So I wanted to keep this setup very simple and be cost conscious about it. So that's why I just chose this universal handle. And on the other side, this is their universal mini handle. So the difference between the regular and this one is a little bigger for one, so it's got a little bit more grip to it, but this one also doesn't have that L shape, so it just goes directly into the cage. Now they both have the thumb screws, which is very convenient, but this one just goes straight in. Now the reason why I didn't feel the need to get this L-shaped bracket one on this side was simply because I didn't need to. I'm able to access the ports with just this regular handle, and I was able to see that that would be the case just by the way the cage was built. And when I was looking at the handle, it sticks out far enough to where it's a non-issue in terms of getting to those ports. So this was $49. I believe this mini one was like $39. So it was a $20 difference. So I decided to save the $20. Now, one thing that I definitely wanted to make sure that I picked up, or let me say, I wanted to make sure that I had a good solution, was for the HDMI cable going into the camera. Now, as a lot of people may know or may not know, you know, Canon has constantly been beat up in the photography community for using the mini HDMI ports. Apparently they're not very durable, or you know, they're easy to break the cables. I don't know, because I'm just getting into videography, but I've heard that enough to the point where I wanted to make sure that I had some sort of solution that would secure that. Now, SmallRig, they sell a kind of like a bracket, kind of like what comes with it's just like what comes with a lot of the cameras, where it mounts in and then you kind of wrap the cable around it so it keeps the cable in there nice and secure. And I thought about going that route, but then I did some searching and I found this HDMI adapter piece, which is basically just a little piece that mounts to the cage. It has an input for the HDMI, and then there's a cord that comes out and goes into the mini HDMI. So I chose to go that route because then that way I could just, if I had to take this off, if I wanted to transport whatever, I could take the HDMI out of this and I didn't have to constantly take the mini HDMI in and out of the camera. Now, of course, you know, with all of these ports, the more you put something in, take it out, put it in, take it out, it's going to wear down that port. And so to me, this was the better option than having the other one that's in there, which technically I could still just take it out here and leave that in, but then like I have a much bigger cord. Like this isn't even that big of a cord, but if I had to take this off to take the monitor off, but I didn't want to unplug this, I've got this big cord, where this here is just much smaller. So it's out the way. I've got the cable running through the handle area, so it's out of the way, so I can hold it. That cable is not in the way. This is a nice small cable, so it's out of the way. So it just works. So very good setup there. Now, speaking of cables and this monitor here, the monitor that I have is the Feelworld, and I don't know the model number. I will put the model number on the screen, but it's their budget one. It was 125 bucks. Again, I wasn't trying to get anything super fancy, super expensive. Like I wanted to jump into this world, see what I liked and didn't like, and then I can upgrade from there. So in testing this out, this is a great little monitor. It's worked well so far for what I've done, but I've not done any actual like real shooting with this. So time will tell, and I will report back on the channel because I'm gonna definitely take you guys along on the journey, and everything that I'm doing, it'll be on the channel. So I'll report back on how well this works. But one of the things that I really liked about this monitor was that it can take Canon batteries. So I have Sony batteries as well, but the Canon batteries are obviously smaller, so that means they will be lighter, so it would just make this setup not as heavy. Now, of course, they're not going to last as long as a Sony, the big Sony MP batteries, but because I'm a Canon shooter, I have a ton of batteries. So that really was a non-issue. Now, in terms of how I have this mounted, because there's definitely people in the YouTube space and on the internet that balk at this, and they think that this is not the way that you should have the monitor because they say that it's too high. And you know, in the videos that I watched, I do understand where they're coming from with that. I use this because this is what came with it, first of all. So I didn't want to buy the $40 RE pin mount that SmallRig has to be able to attach it to the handle. So I use this because it came with it, and I really just wanted to see if it's a problem for me. I know for people out there, they don't like to have it that high. They like it to be lower, and that's fine. I may not care that it's this high. So I didn't want to go out and spend the money to buy another mount when this one came with one, and I could put it on the camera as is. So I will be testing that out to see. I guess their biggest issue is that because the lens is here, the screen is so much higher that if you're filming, you know, you're having to like look up, and it's just not natural to have your lens here, but you're having to look way up here. I don't know, time will tell. We'll see if that is an issue. So I have this HDMI that goes in here. And then over here, I picked up a little SmallRig cold shoe mount to be able to mount my microphone. Now, the reason why I didn't put it in this cold shoe mount was because I didn't want a cable running from this side of the camera all the way to this side of the camera, because I'm a stickler when it comes to cable management, and that would just drive me crazy. So since the port is on the left side of the camera, it just made more sense to have the microphone on this side, so then that way I can just plug in the mic. Now, in terms of the mic, this is just a cheap Comica mic that I bought on Amazon like 5 or 6 years ago. And when I use this mic, it works. It is more than sufficient for my needs. And you know, right now, I don't necessarily plan on doing much where I need the audio. Like I really just want to focus on building good technique and you know, flexing some creative muscle to really film some things that are interesting and put some things together that are interesting. So I'm not too worried about audio at the moment. So I didn't really care about the mic right now. This will definitely serve my needs more than sufficiently for the time being. So that's the setup. It feels really good in my hands. There's a decent amount of weight, but not so much weight to where it would be uncomfortable. Now, of course, I have a small lens on here. This is just the Canon 40mm pancake. So if I had a bigger lens, of course, the setup would be heavier. But you know, when it comes to filming, the more weight you have, the better, because you know, it helps with those micro jitters. So I wasn't too pressed about the weight necessarily, especially considering that it's like right now, you know, I'm not planning on, I don't do weddings at all. But, you know, even if I was to tap into that from a video front, you know, that's some time away. So I wasn't overly concerned about weight, that sort of thing. Weight's never really bothered me with camera gear anyway. So I wasn't very concerned about that. So that is the setup. I definitely have to say I like it. I've played around with it. I feel like I've been able to get some really smooth handheld footage. Now, speaking of handheld, some people may have a question of why I chose to go the camera rig route instead of getting a gimbal. And there's a couple reasons. Now, number one, cost. I didn't want to buy a gimbal. Like, again, I'm just getting into videography, so I didn't want to spend the money on a gimbal, but I still wanted to have something that would allow me to get better handheld footage, especially because I'm using my R versus the R5 that has the in-body image stabilization. So I wanted something that would help me get better footage over just hand holding just the camera. So cost of the gimbal. And then number two, for me personally, when I watch videos, I watch a lot of YouTube, like video portraits and that sort of thing. I personally prefer the more handheld look over the super smooth gimbal look. And I think a part of that is just because gimbals are so prevalent right now that everybody is using them. So everyone's footage is like super smooth and, you know, it all kind of looks the same. Whereas for me personally, and this is just for me, you most certainly can feel differently. But for me, when I see footage that has kind of more of that handheld motion to it, to where it's smooth, but it still kind of has that handheld look, I feel more submersed in that video. It helps me feel like I'm actually there versus the super smooth gimbal footage to where I just feel like I'm a viewer. So I like that more submersive feel. And so I wanted to challenge myself and to see, you know, what kind of footage I can get and what kind of technique I can build up just doing handheld. And as I go through this process and I go through this journey, if I get to a point where, you know, there's some things where I'm like, yeah, I really need more steady footage, then I might look into a gimbal at that point in time. But with this whole thing, I wanted to be different than how I normally am. Normally, I would just buy everything under the sun and then figure it out as I go. Where this, I really wanted to start a little bit more modestly and work on technique and my creative aspect of filming before I started worried about all the other gear and that sort of thing. Because I could have a gimbal, I could have all that fancy stuff, but if I'm not filming things that really help tell a story or are visually interesting, then none of that stuff matters. And that's what I want to focus on first. But I wanted to have something that would help me be able to get good footage in the process. So that is that. I will link everything in the description below. They aren't affiliate links or anything of the sort, but I will link everything in the description. So if you want to build out this kind of rig, by all means, you can do so. And if you have any questions on it at all, feel free to drop those in the comments. And while you're down in the comments, or if you're not, go on down in the comments and let me know what type of setup you have and how it's worked for you. Do you prefer a camera cage like this? Or do you prefer to have a gimbal? Or do you prefer to have a mixture of the two? How do you shoot? What do you shoot with? So I'm very excited to jump into this. I'm very excited to learn some new things. So if you want to be around for this journey, now I will say, I will continue to do photography. That will continue to be like my main bread and butter. And I will continue to have photography related stuff on this channel, but I am going to be mixing in the videography stuff as well. So that way there's a nice mix. I want to bring some different things to the channel, just so that way there's a lot of just interesting things and it's not just one thing that gets repetitive. So if you want to be around for that and you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe and ring that notification bell. On your way out, please give this video a thumbs up. It definitely helps the channel. Drop a comment down below, even if it's just to say thumbs up or tog or good stuff or keep going, whatever it is. Put a period. See what happens if you just comment and put a period. I don't know, that would probably be just as beneficial. So yeah, leave a comment. As always, I appreciate you being here. I look forward to sharing this journey with you. So until the next video, take care.